Hi, I'm Lucia Lee. I'm an educator and creative writer.
And I'm JT Neal. I'm an organizer, writer, poli sci nerd, and just a general geek. And you're listening to What's Wrong, Baltimore,
Our podcast where we talk about Baltimore
the issues that affect the people who live in it.
and the implications they carry to all American cities.
Hope you're ready to sit back and do some listening, because we're going to do some talking.
I wanted to talk about what happened in South Korea recently. If you haven't heard already, the president of South Korea had declared martial law, which is something that's usually declared during natural disasters, wartime, and coups d'etats. And National Assembly rejected the declaration of martial law. And there's a lot of background that we can get into about why he did that. It was definitely kind of a desperate attempt at maintaining power because his family members are embroiled in scandals right now, and he's had a lot of opposition in the National Assembly or the parliament. He's been having a lot of opposition with bills getting passed. So last ditch attempt at really bringing down the hammer was martial law. And even though it seems like it was very quick, it was a very serious situation. It feels like Western media downplayed how much the military and police were mobilized for martial law, but they were mobilized and they were out on the street. Massive protests from normal citizens were happening all over and in front of the National Assembly or Parliament. And the lawmakers had to break into the building, like overcome actual literal obstacles and blockades to break into the building and put in their vote to reject martial law. And that happened within several hours, basically. So, something to keep in mind is that people are still quite traumatized from their own pretty recent experience from what it's like to be under a dictatorship. Even into the 80s, there were student uprisings, like university student, fresh out of high school kids being massacred in the streets because of an authoritarian dictator in South Korea. This is all under the supervision of the US, by the way. During wartime, during martial law, really the person who has ultimate authority over the South Korean military would be just like a US general. So, all that to say, this was really weighing heavy on me. And then I finally saw this Daily Show little clip that covered it for like a minute out of like a 9-minute segment. And it really solidified what I was thinking about it. So let's get into it. It's a 1 minute in like a 9-minute long video. I feel like the seriousness of it was extremely downplayed, as well as what the US really had to do with all that, which is
Mm-hmm.
a lot. And you can tell because the way the US military responded to all the events is just like, it's good that the president breaking the law was stopped or something like that. It was very neutral, non endorsement, but not necessarily saying anything.
Yes, there is something that I've noticed. Maybe it's just because, as a poli sci nerd, there's a subtlety to how the US government will say and respond to things. And their response at the beginning, during, and after the crisis was like cool kid trying to be cool, but very high key panicking because, like, on multiple fronts, was it something they weren't prepared for, right? There was a reason why the State Department was like, nobody called us beforehand, because that was them very subtly being like, yes, they were answering a literal question from media, like, did the president reach out to you? Them responding that way was them being like, this has come out of left field and it is not something we're happy with. Them being very chill at the end, like, well, we're glad the law wasn't broken, was them being like, we didn't know how to react in a way that was going to be conducive to our interests and to basically the people of South Korea. You gotta remember, like, that big democracy conference that they had about Asia, they had it in South Korea. Like Biden, his entire term has been like South Korea is a model democracy for like the world and especially for Asia. This is a region that we want to like invest more in
Yeah.
through democratic efforts. And to have the same dude who's at the White House not a year before about democracy to try and upend his democracy was something that was like, we have to have a response, but what will our response be? What do
Well,
we, how do we, you know,
just to go back to the video, I also wanted to point out how this idea of like don't tell Trump that he could do that is pretty messed up, because where do you think South Korea in a sense got it from, if not the United States foreign policy to just act like it's wartime in other places, therefore anything goes? It's messed up. And I also did not appreciate the comment about everyone get back to K-pop chop chop or just good old Asian efficiency without explaining any of the complicated context around it, which is crazy. And I also think it's crazy that they never explained what martial law would even mean or look like, and instead made like a cheap little reference to Squid Games, which is horrific if you think about it, because Squid Games is referring to a hyper capitalism imposed by United States foreign policy that created the monster that is the current South Korean economy and political stage. It's become a point of hypercapitalism where there is no hope for upward mobility. There is no hope for anyone other than being the families of the chaebols really doing anything that could change it. It felt extra rough hearing it from Ronnie Chang, which, not that, hearing it from an Asian is gonna like make it feel better or worse necessarily, but it's just like it's very US centric for someone who I know for a fact is not just US based.
mhm.
So that was really disappointing
Isn't he
that
Chinese?
um I don't think it's so simple. I think he's definitely spent some time in Singapore, I want to say.
Well, no, I just meant like he isn't,
Ethnically,
yeah, like ethnically, like he is coming from a position that's not as well versed in the specifics of like I imagine to him he's sort of making joke of it because well
no.
he doesn't.
I think if you're from anywhere in Asia, you're well versed with some part that imperialism took in your country's history. Whether you're straight up a Chinese national, you are aware of what opium has done because of British policy. Whether you're from Singapore or Malaysia or the Philippines, you know very well what imperialism looks like and the consequences it's had with the US or Japan. Like, I don't think there's any excuse really, and I don't think there's excuse for Americans to act like they are faultlessly ignorant. Like, if you know anything about imperialism, you know the pattern, you know what it is. I'm not saying like it's not okay that you didn't know, but I think it's not okay to excuse someone for not knowing because they are from somewhere that's not related to what's going on in South Korea, because I think we all have a responsibility to each other to understand and recognize these patterns.
Very true. That's fair.
And let's not pretend like there was no other country that had to deal with something similar like this.
Well, well,
Vietnam, like just
well, I was
anywhere.
well, I was just thinking by just the conversations we've had and just sort of me reading up. Whenever somebody says martial law, because of my background, I know every time somebody does it, it is serious. But even for me, like hearing it and learning that it's not a rare occurrence. In the United States, it is rare for anyone to discuss martial law seriously. It has a historical context that we have to dig for. But in South Korea, that's not the case. Most people who are alive have experienced martial law being declared, and there is a specific context, there's a specific history that the average just South Korean would know because they've lived through it, right? Like there's a reason why everybody took to the streets, and
I
it's
think
not
that's
just because.
incorrect. I think it's weird to say that you should just know. There's
No,
plenty of things Americans don't know about their own history,
no, no, that's what I
even
mean.
if
Like,
it's very recent and most people who are currently living have lived through it. I understand that you're saying like shouldn't there be a basic understanding, but like what there
no,
should
that's
be
not
and
what I'm
shouldn't
saying at
be
all.
doesn't mean that it is affect what is actually in people's knowledge.
No, I'm saying the opposite. Like, there's a lot people don't know. They don't know that it's something they could know. I wasn't trying to excuse Ronnie. I was just like, from his perspective, it might just be martial law was declared and it's serious. He doesn't know that martial law has been declared in South Korea a few times recently, and that specific things happened that
No,
had greater impact.
I know
It's
what you're
like,
trying to do, JT. You're trying to come from a place of empathy and compassion. But I'm telling you, all of those jokes, every single one that had a punchline, was systematically placed to kind of brush it under the rug. And that's my
oh,
larger issue that I'm saying is that we can't, like, I grew up watching The Daily Show. I grew up watching Colbert Report. I love these satirists, these liberal satirists, and it helped me form my sense of political identity today. But we can't rely on mainstream media like we used to. And honestly, I'm not sure we even should have in the first place because they're simply not going to cover things in a way that exposes the larger pattern, which it all comes back to the US government. And that's my thing. It's not even Ronnie Chang. It is his face saying those things, but people are writing it in a writer's room and people are greenlighting it from like a more producer, like higher level position, and it's a whole institution backed by even bigger institutions that's just not talking about it and instead committing 9 minutes or like 8 minutes out of like a 9.5 minute clip to talking about this other white guy. My point is that they were spending so much time talking about his alcoholism, his creepy sexual behavior, like all this and that, and like we're zeroing in on making fun of people and feeling superior to someone who's probably got a pretty serious problem with alcoholism. It doesn't seem to be functioning very well, and we're like, haha, what a joke, we're better than them. Meanwhile, the actual thing that's revealing what the source of the power is being neglected to a minute. And I'm just saying that that's what has been done, where our perspective has been purposefully made smaller. Well, you don't think Ronnie Chang knows some of these things? You don't think people like in that writer's room knew some of the history, or maybe not, but either way, that's not the point of what they're doing there.
jokes definitely, because I feel like a cursory, like Wikipedia, like reading the New York Times article about it would have been like, oh, this is not just martial law is being declared, a dictator. Like, there is actual specific human history. Because I was like, these jokes kind of feel like someone was like, okay, this is a news thing that happened. Let's do a quick
Yeah,
2 seconds on it. Right.
yeah,
And it is reductive in a
it
way
is.
that can be,
And it's not Ronnie Chang. This is something that The
yeah.
Daily Show does a lot, where they're like, oh, our black correspondent will talk about this black cultural issue, or our gay correspondent talks about this gay current social event. Like, it's a thing. And that's why it's not about Ronnie, actually.
See,
Yeah.
I think is funny is that we're looking at the Daily Show and it's like literally this was started just to be like a fun news spoof.
Yeah.
And this reality, the conversation we're having is because the news media itself is so bad that we are holding a Comedy Central show to a higher journalistic standard. Like
Yeah.
they should be talking about cute puppy things and laughing at it, but
Sure.
there has to be a critique of how they cover important historical realities. And
Yeah.
there's something almost cosmically sad about the fact that like this whole conversation is taking place because like our news should have done a better
News
job
isn't
of
good
just
enough.
yeah,
So
right,
The Daily Show isn't good enough. So now what? Like,
because like they are, like I've said it for years, the Daily Show and other like news spoofing shows have the tendency to talk about more things that are actually happening than just like CNN or
Yeah.
MSNBC,
Yeah.
right? And Fox News isn't even in the like solar system, right? Like they
Mhm.
don't, you know what I mean? And so it is amazing to me because they are actually like better than just the news.
Yeah.
But there's, they're comedians. They're in a writer's room.
Right.
They're trying to make people chuckle. And it's like it's
Yeah.
hard it's hard to do that in general. Comedy is just hard, but then to do it from the lens of I'm trying to make a joke about things that are happening. How do I do that in a way that doesn't inherently reduce the situation? That's another thing, because like you said, right? Like we'll have the black correspondent talk about this black thing. That is so reductive,
Mhm.
right? But also, how often do you get to see black people on the news talking about something that impacts them at all, right?
Yeah.
And like it's a greater, more annoying and vexing issue
Sure. But I
that
think
this is a great
go ahead.
that was that this is a great opportunity for us to just to bring up, because this is not, you can't really, you people shouldn't be making jokes or light about it for multiple reasons at multiple levels. The
Well, I'm
first
not
being, of
even
course, the
opposed to the jokes. I think it could have been better jokes, honestly.
well, yeah, no, yeah,
I think it's ripe with comedy, like of like American hypocritical like policy. I think that could have been a great
very true.
way to, like, if you think about it, the Squid Games, who is it really about? It's about capitalists, it's about people who hold power. This It's about a type of capitalism put in place by the US. Like I just feel like we could have gone a lot of ways with that. There was a lot of content, but we chose not to because it's actually more compelling to talk about someone falling down drunk on their ass.
Who will have
And I
access
think
to the
this kind
military?
of, yeah, well, this kind of like makes me understand that it was inevitable that Trump was going to win again. And I'm not saying it in a smug, like, I told you so or anything like that. I said no such thing. I did not predict. I was not interested in predicting anything. But the point of me saying this is that we're so used to laughing at what we imagine is a conservative that we don't take a chance to realize that the working class, who would be what we look down on and laugh at, is basically us. Like, what is the middle class? We don't have a middle class in that sense anymore. No one's exactly safe. The difference between lawmakers here and lawmakers in South Korea is that the lawmakers in South Korea know for a fact that they are not safe if president enacts martial law, and they were the ones physically like grappling with the soldiers on the street to break into the building because they are aware that what is at stake. Lawmakers here don't think they're in danger, as well as like CEOs until just recently. So like I'm like, you keep doing these policies that are anti-human and think that you'll be safe with your money or safe with your power, and that is not the case. And I hate that every effort at having liberal comedy or like liberal commentary is about how we're better than them. We're more educated than them. We actually make sense when we talk. We know how to use actual sentences. They're dumb. They're not classy. Blah, blah, blah. Like, this is just liberal elite talk. And we're not actually doing an earnest effort to reach out to the working class because we're the working class. Stop it, like, deluding yourself thinking that you're some kind of middle class. Writers for The Daily Show are working class. We saw this when they went on strike.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, in a sense, could be working class. And anyway, billionaires look down on everyone else. So, like, it doesn't actually matter. We need to really solidify our sense of class consciousness and realize that, like, this rural, like the working class conservative type is someone that we have a lot in common with. Actually, we have the same gripes about, and I think nothing has proven that more than that situation with the CEO of United Healthcare. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I just think that the lack of awareness, the lack of class consciousness, and realizing that we can benefit a lot from solidarity instead of being like, I don't agree with your specific stance on like women's basketball. I just feel like there's a lot of bad takes out there, but let's focus on the goal. I would
Yes.
also say that you and I have disagreed about certain things fundamentally, but that hasn't stopped us from being friends or working towards the same goals or anything like that. And like, I just need everyone to realize when you're interacting with someone, in a sense, you are thinking about what you need from them and thinking about maintaining the relationship. And like it has to be reciprocal, and like I feel like I'm like basically explaining normal human interaction, but I think there is something to be said about how we expect everyone who's on this side to be on the same page about everything that I feel, and it distracts from the larger picture of like, can we secure healthcare, can we secure living wage, can we secure like, who really is in the way of these things?
Yeah. It's something a comedian I follow, he was talking about, is like a lot of, he literally said, I have progressive views, but I'm not actually like a good person. He's like, a lot of liberals are like, they conflate their moral superiority with their views. They're like,
Yeah.
because I have these views, I am truly morally superior.
No.
And he had this wonderful story about how he has a very conservative friend and they were in New York, and a trans woman is walking by in some high heels and falls like right as a bus is coming. And he's
Oh
like,
my
this
gosh.
conservative dude like truly jumped in the street, picked her up like in the nick of time and sent her on her way. And it was like, then he turned to me and was like, this is why men shouldn't wear heels. And he was like, if I had been alone, I would have been like, oh, she's dead. Like she got hit by a bus. He was like, I never would have jumped in the street to save that person, but I would have used the right pronouns. And like, I think that's something that a lot of liberal people do. They conflate their views with their morality and not quite recognizing that their views are, of course, informed by their morality. They're connected, but they're not one to one. They're not the same thing,
No.
right? Like
No.
my morality hasn't changed since you met me, but my views have moved. They've changed,
Yeah.
right? Like the thing that drives my views, my progressive, my liberal, whatever, however you want to describe them, because the furthest thing I am is conservative. All of these things are informed, but they kind of are, they truly are separate. And I agree, right? Like there is a huge lack of awareness that just because you have a certain thought or certain political thought or political leaning, that you're good, you're set.
Yeah.
It's
And I
like,
feel like,
no, that's,
sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say a lot of the jokes leading up to the actual election day in late night was at the expense of people who are undecided, saying that they're dumb, saying that like, what else are you undecided about? Like something from 5 years ago, like just that they're late, that they're dumb or late or like illogical.
If you talk to a political scientist about like people in the middle, they'll laugh because there's almost no one in the middle. The reality is that everyone has a political leaning, and that most people would prefer to just lie about it, especially to themselves. So
Yeah.
like what was annoying to me was that anyone who was going to like dig into politics would be like, well, why are people undecided? Quickly would have learned with a few Google searches, people aren't undecided. They're just not telling you what they think. I think the reason why is because they were thinking something you weren't thinking. And because you were so loud about what you were thinking, about what you thought, they just preferred not to say it, right? A lot of people just kind of, they had economic anxiety and that's what drove them to the polls. But all of the people that they like and that they trust were not sharing that anxiety. They weren't sharing that. All of the famous people who were, lifting up Democrats across the board, they never talked about the fact that like a Taco Bell taco is $5. This is the first time in Taco Bell's history where they've been less than $1 or $1 at most, and they're $5. They're, like, it's ridiculous, and they never talked about it. They were so busy
No.
talking about how inflation is down. And it's like, I get it. Inflation is the rate of change on prices. That doesn't mean prices are good. So yes, inflation is technically down, but everything is expensive. And
Yeah.
people notice that. That's also something I kind of like have noticed about media and about, especially when they talk about important things, that there's a disconnect between like the textbook definition they might be using and what
Hmm.
people actually think and how and what definition they're using. And so here we are looking at all of these different issues, getting messages that don't line up to what we are experiencing as just people out and about in the world. And it's like, well, no wonder there's constant bewilderment, especially in the media, about why people are reacting the way they are and why they're like undecided. They're not undecided. You have just been so loud about one particular thing. They don't think there's space for them to be earnest and say, well, actually, I'm kind of dissatisfied with what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And like, I blame this person. But then the media person is like, well, it's not their fault. Technically, it's this person's fault or it's that person's fault. And it feels like it can be it is just elitist. If you go up and you
Yeah.
say, I kind of blame, President Biden for this or that, any number of people will be like, well, that's not actually his fault. He doesn't control this. He controls this, and this. And it's like, true, that's fair and valid. But as one elite to another, we know that there are still things a president could do. We still know a person in power, there's something they can do, if
Yeah.
only to just say, hey, we need to change our entire approach to all of this, right? Like, yeah, Biden can't impact prices, but he can scare businesses to the point where they start to lower their prices. Do all of these different kinds of things just in that example that are all indirect, but it's striking a tone, right? And so,
I was just trying to say that that's not a useful way to win people over. And it's
yes.
also not a productive way to talk about these things. I think that it definitely encourages people to keep their actual thoughts to themselves instead. Like this kind of media where we point fingers or look down on people just hasn't been helpful. And I would also say that a lot of the strategies of the Democratic Party, where you just count all these counties and regions where you know it's working class and conservative as lost, not worth even like visiting or campaigning in, and let's just go to the ones that matter. It's really showing such a lack of empathy that no wonder people are not as willing to hear them out. And also a lot of promises being made, but like where has the action really been? I feel like um this would feel a lot worse if we can really point to something that happened in the last 4 years that felt drastically different than the 4 years before that.
Yeah,
But it still
I
felt
agree.
like everything was falling apart for a while. And it's really kooky of the media, especially the liberal media, to cover Trump nonstop, show footage of him, live footage of him just in a car. You can't even see him driving down to go to a court case, instead of showing like actual speeches or anything from like actual Democratic candidates. I just feel like it's so silly to be like Trump this, Trump that, Trump this, Trump that, coverage on Trump, 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 Trump. And then at the end be like, why did everyone vote for him? Like, why is he still relevant? Like, well, girl.
Yeah. Like, I mean, they did make the joke about Trump seeing what's happening in South Korea and getting ideas. And I was like, I will admit, I
We're not
did
even
have that
talking about him right now, though. It's just so crazy.
exactly, right? Like, it's like the fact that you brought it, like, there's a reality here that is far more prescient because there are actual people living it. And here we are, even in this, relating it to Trump. And it's like, at
Yeah.
some point, you have to acknowledge, like, I hated the fact that I began to understand why a lot of conservatives just in general were like, the liberal media this, the liberal media that. And I was like, the media is not that liberal. But I realized
Hmm.
what they were talking about is the fact that the media only kind of cares about itself. It's about what gets likes, what gets clicks,
Mm-hmm.
what gets people to turn on the TV and look at them because that's their revenue. That's how they get their money. That's how they stay open. They are a business unto themselves, right? There are no
Self
non-profit
magnification.
newspapers. Yeah, like the New York Times is not a non-profit. It is a business. CNN is not a non-profit. It is a business. They're all businesses.
Yeah.
And like it was kind of annoying. That was something that I was like I don't really want to in all of the attempts to give Ronnie a pass. That was something I was like, why are we this up? Like this is a serious situation that does not need the lens of potential American, like there's already an American impact. We don't need to start bringing in the president elect into this shit. Like it's not that we didn't need to make that connection. You can make that connection.
Yeah.
You can make that connection with
Yeah.
everything. But like there are more serious implications, more human implications.
Yeah.
That's the word I'm looking
To
for.
say that the fascism era is starting with Trump's second term? Really? That's when it
Right?
started? In the future?
In a future second term. Like America didn't have fascism starting to flare up in the first term. It's only now that we're like, oh no, we're worried about fascists in America. Like, they've been here. It's been
It's
getting
a
worse.
meaningless word. I feel like
See,
we've been
that's,
making it meaningless.
yeah, I didn't even know this. It bothered me. So, like, when Benito Mussolini made fascism, like when he literally started the first, like, they describe themselves as fascists, right? It is truly an Italian word that has moved around. And like a part of the initial definition was government and business working together. And that was the definition until the 80s when Webster was like, Merriam Webster, like the company that made dictionaries was purchased. And they changed it. They removed that business portion. And it's like, for years, so many people, so many like leftist hippies have been like, America is fascist and da 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 da. And like now we all just think of it as like lip service, but they were truly using like the original definition, which most people don't know. And when you look at it from the original definition, you're like, wait a minute, they were using the right word. They just used it so much, and we've sanitized the definition so much that now it's meaningless. And it's like, no, it was the
Yeah.
right term. It's just you didn't know the full definition. People weren't just saying it because they were like, you're mean, you're like a dictator, you're someone who just tells me what to do, so I'm going to call you a fascist. It's like you have business ties that you've leveraged for political power, and you intend to give more political power
Mm-hmm.
to those
Mm-hmm.
businesses. That's literally what the first fascists were doing.
Yeah.
There's no differentiation.
I mean,
But
ditto
like,
for
yeah,
communism and socialism becoming
exactly.
meaningless. Yeah.
We've made them meaningless, and now we don't know how to describe the things we're living with other than dissatisfactory. And that's why people are so like just kind of like generally mad. we've
Yeah.
we've we've removed, words are so powerful and magical, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but someone has been slowly changing our definitions and allowing certain concepts to be so thoroughly meaningless that now when someone uses them, it's like, you were going to use that word anyway. You call anybody you don't like a fascist.
Yeah,
You
it's
call
not
anybody you
about the
don't like a
meaning, it's about
communist.
the negative connotation. You're using it as an insult, not
Mm-hmm.
as a descriptive adjective.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, that's interesting that we just come back to the word itself of fascism and communism because that's what the president of South Korea said was the reason communists that have infiltrated the oppositional party, the North Korean communists, and that's what he
Mm-hmm.
claimed to do the declaration of martial law. So it's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
South Koreans are familiar with this page of the handbook for a fascism. Like we recognize what that is. I feel like I've told this story before about my grandpa moving from what is now North Korea to South Korea in the dead of night, just like with his dad, just the clothes on his back, relocating, starting middle school in what is now South Korea. And then during the Korean War, border would like change as the troops would like come in and then retreat and come in or retreat, right? So his middle school, his like town would get taken over by the communists. Communists brought in all these middle school band nerds to come together, play at this like celebration of like, yay, we've been saved by communists. And then when they were kind of beaten back up north and the US backed military retook that area, all the kids who played in that like celebration were put to death for being communists, except my grandfather lived because he just happened to be sick that day. And it's like that's how powerful the word communist was at that time. You can just call someone you hate a communist and the Americans would take care of it for you.
Hmm.
And that has been a recurring thing in a lot of countries in Asia. All that to say, this is a common thing that we've seen before. Side note, I found that I Googled it and Ronnie Cheng is Malaysian, but his name is, it looks like it's of Chinese origin. And so that's why I meant like he seems Chinese ethnically, but I guess he's like a Malaysian citizen or something, or was born in Malaysia.
Yeah, he's just Malaysian, I guess.
Yeah, I would just call him Malaysian, but those islands and that area, I think there's a pretty good population of like Chinese and even Indian immigrants, and like it gets complicated ethnically, is what I'm saying. Because I think when we think about race here and we say Malaysia, people get confused because they're like, oh, but he looks like he's from India. It's like, yeah, that's a thing.
That is very much a thing. I think I was just I try to give as many I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I was
Yeah,
just like,
I think that actually happened online because of Moana, where people were like, wait, Moana's ancestors were African? And it's like, no, I think they're Austronesian. If you go to like Papua New Guinea,
man,
they do look pretty dark over there.
people thought people thought Moana was African.
I think Moana 2 came out and then there's like a scene where the ancestors come like out and they just
Yeah.
happen to be really dark skinned and they're like, wait, Moana's ancestors are from Africa, you know? So I think
Well, I
our
mean,
conception of race is like very rigid, whereas in other areas of the world, that's not how that works. But yeah, people say that about
racism
certain
social.
tribes within the Philippines too, where they're like, are they black? It's like,
Yeah,
what do you?
it's yeah. Your skin tone is a byproduct of how close you are to the equator, like sun exposure. It's not just because you're from Africa. Like people who live close to
Well,
the
it's not
equator
just
are just
about
kind of.
the color, it's also like the features and things like that. I think people immediately associate like certain things with certain races, and it's like, well,
Oh yeah, that's very true.
that's not really a thing. Like, I don't think race is a thing like that. So,
Race
just,
is a social construct. Like it's not.
yeah,
It
I
is
don't think it's like these
purely
eyes that make me Asian. Like, it's a
no.
little bit more than that. But yeah, I think that's why I even added that thing about Ronnie Chang because I feel like our ideas about race get kind of kooky.
Well, I was just trying to understand, like, because I was like, I don't know if he, because I was like, I don't know where he was born, and I didn't know if like he truly would have, like, so for example, there's a lot of stuff going on in Haiti right now. I
Yeah.
don't have a lot of close connection to them, other than the fact that technically they are African American in the same way that I am, right? Their ethnic origin, why they are in Haiti, is the same reason I'm in America now. However, there is a ton of history. Like I've been learning over the pandemic just what the history of Haiti is. And I can talk now, like if we talk about like all of the violence that's happening there, I
Hmm.
can actually be like, I can actually come from a place of I have a basic understanding of what's going on because there's a lot of stuff that's not even covered in a basic history for you to
Yeah.
understand, right? But if you look at me, black person, like why are the black people in Haiti going off? Because they are? No.
That wouldn't
No,
be an appropriate question to ask
that
someone
wouldn't
just
be
because they're black. Yeah.
very true. But also, but if But if I was operating with my understanding of just history in the area from like 2019, any take I would have would miss so much context,
Yeah.
despite the fact that I do have some connection, some actual tangible connection
Mm-hmm.
to the place, to the location. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, is Ronnie Chang Teen JT or is he 2024 JT? Because if he's
I see.
2024 JT, he should have been like, okay, that joke is just kind of bad. That was not written very well.
Again, I
You know
put
what? Can
like
we
no
just not?
blame on him. I put no blame on him. He's like in essence like a writer slash actor.
Very true. Very, very true. But still,
Yeah.
like, he's got,
It does feel different
there's,
seeing him say it to America
there's,
though, I will say.
yeah, like, there's just a moment where you, as the person reading it, have to be like, I'm not going to say that, right? Or I am going to say this because I know better. Or I don't know. I don't know enough to know if I can say this, right? Like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is just something he has the right and the privilege to just sort of do at his leisure.
Yeah.
But again, I was like, I don't know if he knows enough to be like, okay, wait a minute. Maybe we shouldn't talk about this in a 1 minute segment other than it be like it happened.
Hmm.
Right. Like, or be like, this is something that we're going to have to open up at another time. Because I think a joke about the relief that it's okay, there's not going to be like, it's been dealt with. That's something you can joke about. But
Sure.
all of the other stuff just kind of feels like once you get more context, you're like, oh,
It's
that
icky.
wasn't,
Yeah.
yeah, it's icky. It's like, that's not
Yeah.
something
I
I
don't
want to
like
laugh at.
the Asians being efficient thing is good
Yeah.
in that it's not necessarily true, and also that it allows people to continue neglecting certain demographics within what we consider Asian. Yeah, it's not great. And it makes people feel like it's okay to ask more of Asian American employees. Like, it's just like,
Mm,
why continue that stereotype for what other than to see if you can get a chuckle? That's all.
yeah. Not
Yeah.
very true. Not the best, not the best racial portrayal in terms of jokes.
There's ways to do it with substance
Yeah.
or like, yeah, some other purpose. That's all.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget, we are here out of love. Let us know what's bothering you, Baltimore. Maybe we can address it next time.
Yeah, and send us an email at what's.wrong.bmore@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at what's.wrong.bmore, BMORE. And, if you have suggestions, we are accessible through Patreon as well. So until then, until next time, we hope you take care and find little ways to indulge.